I think I love Warp. It's exactly the kind of ability that I adore. I called it the free trial version of spells, and I think that that's pretty apt. For a heavy discount, you get the one-time effects of creatures or permanents, and then later can pay their full cost if you want the full subscription for them. Which is one of the reasons why Tannuk Steadfast Second makes such a great commander, as he gives everything Warp, which is pretty fantastic. But the question I've been asked is, what's the difference between Sneak Attack, Purphoros Bronze-Blooded, and Tannuk? So let's dive into these nuances. First, the classic Sneak Attack doesn't let you put artifacts into play, where Tannuk and Purphoros do. The trade-off is that Sneak Attack lets you sneak Eldrazi into play, where Tannuk and Purphoros restrict you to red, creatures, and artifacts only. Second, Sneak Attack and Purphoros make you sacrifice whatever you sneak in at the end of turn, where Warp exiles the card to be cast later. There's pros and cons to this, since you may want some of your creatures or artifacts in your graveyard for other uses. Third, and the big reason I love Warp, is that it is casting the card. This means you get cast triggers, like Cascade, where Sneak Attack and Purphoros don't get those benefits. Let's look at Cascade, an ability that says when you cast this spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Meaning, you can be paying 3 mana for a 7 mana Ingenuity engine and cascading into any other spell casting 6 or less for free. Free! Then you get its cast triggers too. Yowza! That is so much free value, so much free real estate that I had to build around Tannuk. Getting to cast everything you warped from exile again later gives you twice as much value from these cast effects once you start scaling your mana generation. To the point where Wild Magic Sorcerer is probably one of the best value-adding effects you could put in a deck like this, putting Cascade on the first spell you cast from exile each turn. Once you start recasting spells that you warped previously, you pop off so hard. And that's one of the most expensive cards in the deck for that reason. Two of the other most expensive cards in the list are Ruby Medallion and the Fire Crystal because they reduce red spells you cast. And, as mentioned previously, Warp is casting the spell. That's right, these two cost reducers reduce Warp costs as well. Just 2 mana to cast your biggest, beefiest boys and get all of these sweet cast or enters triggers you can handle. It's for that reason Hazoret's Monument is in the deck too, reducing your red creature cost by 1, while also letting you rummage for more ammo to warp into play. Any 2 of these cost reducing effects and you're paying only a single red mana, just like the original Sneak Attack, but better. They also help reduce the cost of spells once you've cast them again from exile. Since we have such a high average mana value in this brew, at over 5, we need to make sure we can cast everything in the deck. Thankfully, we now have red mana dorks in Sunset Strikemaster and Zookeeper Mechan, as well as the colorless Ornithopter of Paradise. These can help us ramp in red without having to rely solely on artifact mana or rituals. I've left rituals out of this deck entirely, so we really need help to do things the hard, easy way? That's why 40 lands in the deck is appropriate and required. You may think that's overkill, but you absolutely have to hit your land drops every turn in this deck, since you want to be hard casting 7, 8, and 9 cost cards later in the game. Don't knock it until you try it, it's mathematically correct. Sound off in the comments though, how many lands do you think is appropriate for this deck list? Being that, without discounters, you need 7 mana to cast Tannuk and warp a spell in the same turn. We really need to blitz that mana value. With Tannuk in play, your magic mana value is 6 to cast 2 warp spells a turn, and 9 to cast 3 warps a turn, as well as the majority of everything in the deck again from exile. Nice. A few more value enhancers before we look at the amazing choices we have to sneak into play. First, with Vedalken Orrery. Many think that this flash enabler is overrated, and in most cases, I agree with them. But when you can flash in massive monsters to get their enters effects, eat an attacker, then hardcast them from exile on your next turn, That's value beyond just being able to cast your mana rocks at instant speed. And what if you didn't need to pay to cast spells from exile? The room Warped Space lets us pay 0 mana for the first spell we cast from exile each turn, which is actually anything we previously warped. This is a huge value multiplier and lets us get more and more free value whenever we want to recast one of our previously warped cards. An absolute knockout of an include that pays its 6 mana off after just a single use. And so do effects that throw damage around based on your large creatures, like Warstorm Surge or my favorite, Sarkhan's Unsealing. These let you either start picking off troublesome creatures, wipe the entire board, or throw damage directly at your opponent's faces. Since we're paying just 3 mana for creatures with 7 or more mana value and power in the 6, 7, or 8 range, these can help take a player out of the game while using your big creatures to attack and wipe out a different player. The value is insane. And I mentioned Cascade earlier. We'll look at that further, but Sunbird's Invocation gives everything you cast from your hand, even with Warp, a kind of Cascade. That's just more free real estate. You'll be paying 3 mana for a 7 mana value creature, cascading into a 6 mana creature, dealing 8 damage to anything you want. This deck just goes out of control with synergies, all based on the fact that Warp is casting the card. And because of this, I've gone much heavier into Cascade with my card choices. We aren't super diverse in our overall options, but we have Boarding Party, Aurora Phoenix, and Maelstrom Colossus as options, as well as Meteoric Mace, Ingenuity Engine, and Noise Marine. And I guess Trumpeting Carnosaur kind of cascades thanks to the Discover mechanic as well. That's several options in the mix that bring friends to the party, where casting one spell, often for just 3 mana mind you, can get you 12 or 13 mana value worth of value. It's just too good to pass up. This is a deck that thrives on its synergies and succeeding by paying way less mana than you should for tons of effects and triggers. It's many of these effects that I've chosen to include in the brew. There are a lot of ways you can go with a Tannuk deck, and I've seen people recommend going all dragons, including nothing but artifact creatures, Powers Matters themes, and more. But I love value in my commander decks, and I've chosen to prioritize creatures with Enters effects for inclusion. This ranges from little old Solemn Simulacrum, who for 3 mana is still a discount, through to Combustible Gearhulk, one of the best sources of card draw and damage in the deck, and all the way up to Skitterbeam Battalion, who leaves behind 2 4/4 trample haste tokens when we warp it in. It's also because of this that, even if we don't recast something we've warped from exile, we're still getting amazing, cheap value from everything we have. That's a win any way you cut it. Surprise wins can come out of nowhere with double strike granters like Terror of Mount Velis, Avatar of Slaughter, or Blast Furnace Hellkite, giving your entire board double strike and surprise winning with only a few other creatures in play. These are some of your game enders. And more value comes from draw engines like Dragon Mage, Nullspine Dragon, and Sandstorm Oracle, each offering different ways to draw boatloads of cards to keep you in options for warping over and over and over again. Keeping gassed up with ammo in hand is crucial for this brew, which is why I love Coveted Jewel. With Tannuk sneaking this in for 3 mana, it's a free 3 cards drawn. It enters, draws 3 cards, makes 3 mana, replacing that mana cost, and you can leave it in exile for the rest of forever so your opponents never get an opportunity to take it away from you. It's literally a free way to draw 3 cards. So good. I also really like the opportunity to use your opponent's stuff against them. Firbolg Flautist, Havoc Eater, and Molten Primordial all goad or steal for use against everyone else at the table, which you get to do again if you cast these for their warp ability, then recast them from exile. These are tricks up your sleeve for later, and essentially turns exile into a second hand of cards for you to tap into later in the game. This warp ability is wild. Then I've also chosen to put almost all of the deck's removal on spells we can warp. Meteor Golem, Spine of Ishsaw, Pinnacle Killship, all ways to take out the worst thing on the table for, often, just 3 mana. Sneaking these in and then later recasting them is just too great. I also really like Extinguisher Battleship 2. It blasts a non-creature permanent, great for letting red deal with things it normally can't, like enchantments, then blasts all creatures in play for 4 damage. This is perfect because Tannuk has a big booty with 5 toughness, surviving the board wipe and being able to either attack or help crew the spacecraft for some big beats. It's exactly what we want here. All in all, I've managed to put this brew together for under $70, a nice reasonable budget for a nice reasonable deck at a nice reasonable power level. Check out my list in the description right now. But at this budget and power level, I wasn't able to include some of the best stuff. So let's look at the upgrade. And immediately, if we're adding in some game changers, we want to start with Jeska's Will. This deck can be so mana hungry if Tannuk gets blasted once or twice that a good ritual may enable us to cast Tannuk and warp something out on the same turn. That is invaluable and would make this one of the only instants or sorceries I would have in the final list. To find room, I'd swap out one of the smaller creatures in the deck, like Ingot Chewer. While it's cute to evoke it from exile after warping it in, it's really the weakest of the creatures at the level we're warping. Apart from that, there were some sneaky bombs I just could not make work at this budget level, like everyone's favorite Blightsteel Colossus. The terror of a lot of playgroups, giving this 11/11 Trample Infector haste has noped so many players from the game that there's a reason its name is whispered in the halls of insane asylums around the world. And being able to do that on like turn 4 for just 3 mana is downright unfair a lot of the time. Here's where I'd cut the smallest of our Cascade creatures, Noise Marine. Sure, it gets you free value, but at 5 mana, the chances of it cascading into something good are outweighed by your chances of getting nothing but a free mana rock. Portal to Phyrexia is just as unfair as Blightsteel, letting you pay 3 mana to warp it in and having each opponent sacrifice 3 creatures. The earlier you do this in the game, the more akin it is to a one-sided board wipe, and a lot of folks can't recover when you may also have a big, chunky, warped creature also still in play too. One of our other removal pieces like Meteor Golem or Spine of Ishsa are our best cuts for the portal in the current list. And I really wanted to include Sundial of the Infinite in the deck too, but it has exploded in price lately, largely because of Tannuk. Now at close to $15, this neat trick lets us wait for the delayed warp trigger at the end of turn to hit the stack, which would normally cause us to exile our warp goodies, and end the turn, clearing that trigger from the stack, letting us keep these tricks for good. It's cute and makes everything a little bit more mana intensive, but it's fun and it works. This is where I would choose between Panharmonicon or the Sundial for inclusion in the end list. If you're cheating a way to keep your creatures, you're also cheating yourself of their second enters effects, making Panharmonicon half as good, so choose wisely. Then lastly, I really wish we could get a reprint of Nykthos Shrine to Nyx sometime soon. It is the best land for monocolored decks. Nykthos though is $35 and continues to increase in price every day. Save us, please Wizards, and reprint this until it's budget friendly. With all of this said though, I want to know what you think about this deck. You can check out my list right now, linked in the description as always, but don't leave without hitting that like button or subscribing. And don't leave without checking out my sponsors like Card Conduit. They are hands down the easiest way to sell your individual Magic cards without the hassle of traditional buy listing. They'll get you top dollar while handling all of the heavy lifting, from sorting to grading to optimizing your price across a huge network of vendors. And they'll give you cold hard cash for it. You can use the promo code MECHANIC right now for 10% off of all fees. And if you want to pick up the cards for this list, make sure to go check out Card Trader. Use my promo code MECHANIC right now for 5% off your order from any TCG. Card Trader's zero system means you can get cards from all over the world with only one shipping fee. Save money and time today. Lastly, you can check out all of my decks on MOXFIELD. MOXFIELD is the best deck building platform in the world and makes it easy to build decks and search for specific cards with their powerful tools. Have you checked out their drag and drop feature yet? It's revolutionary. Be sure to check out my brews and follow my profile there right now. If you were inspired to brew today, you have to hit that subscribe button. Check out this other deck on my channel right now for more sweet tech. And as always folks, good luck and have fun.